Thanks for tuning in, guys. Today we talk to a licensed interior designer. Hey guys, we're back with another episode, and I'm really excited about this one. My friend Courtney Adams has graciously allowed time to come on. I know she's busy with a lot of things going on, which we'll get into, but I've known Courtney and her husband for many, many years. They're great friends, and just in the brief time catching up with her, I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation, and I think you guys are going to get a lot out of it. So without further ado, Courtney Adams, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course, my pleasure.
This is really great. And I know it's with the holiday season coming up, things are getting kind of wild, so I'm glad we were able to find some time.
Same.
Can you, Courtney, just introduce yourself and explain what you do and how long you've been doing it for?
Sure. Well, I am a licensed interior designer with the state of Texas, and I have been in my profession, thankfully, since graduating Baylor University, and that was way, way back in 2004.
All right. 2004. So a licensed interior designer. What drew you?
Yes.
And this is what your degree was in as well, interior design.
Yes.
What drew you
was.
to this major, and is it what you thought it was going to be when you started school?
I'd say yes and no. I went into my college career thinking I was going to just do a basic business degree because I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I started out, taking the core classes at Baylor. You have a Bible class, we had chapel, you had to do, some sort of recreational activity. I can't remember what I did my freshman year. It might have been tennis or something like that. And I did have a business intro class, and I sat through one semester of it, and not even a few weeks in, I said, I can't do this. We had to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and take quizzes on it. And I said, absolutely not. This cannot be the direction that I'm going. I just am not interested in this. And so I'll definitely admit, God laid it on my heart that I had to get out and figure out what else was out there and what else was available to me. My family has, allowed me to move to Waco, Texas, and go to this wonderful university, and there's got to be something better out there. So I started out in the art building, walking through and just trying to explore, picking up different brochures, really trying to take time in each college around campus to figure out, is this something I could do? And while I loved art, and I still do, and I love sketching and things like that, I just was like, I don't quite have, I think, the talent to make a living at it. So how to, it could be a hobby, but how do I make a career out of art? So that was a no-go. I considered education, but I didn't really have a passion for teaching others at the time. And I thought, I'm not real sure how I could enjoy that for the long haul. And then I happened on to the building of family and consumer science, which sounds like an odd name, which I agree it is. And it houses a lot of different things in it. There's fashion that happens in there. So, I could learn to design clothing, or I could have learned to do merchandising for, retail stores. But then there was this thing called interior design. And the way it was explained to me is that it was a molding of somebody who loves organization, which I 100% do, and somebody too that is talented enough to be like creative, again, not an artist level, but has a way to express themselves. And I always liked unique things and different things. And I thought, I might be able to do this. This might be just enough left and right brain for me to figure this out and make this a thing. This was before like Chip and Joanna, started remodeling, and before interior design was even truly a thing that was, I would say, has gained a lot of popularity. It was so funny. My grandmother, once I told her what my major was, she started calling it inside design. And so it's always been a joke in our family that I'm an inside designer instead of interior designer. But, it was one of those explorations that I had to take the time and I feel like I was able to be thoughtful and prayerful about it, and how, the talents that I've been given, how could I use those in my career? And it's a Bachelor of Science in Family and Consumer Sciences, but that's what an interior design degree was called at Baylor. So I can't say I knew everything going into the career, and I'm just thankful that I was able to come across it when I did, because it's pretty rigorous. Once you start that career path, you really have to stick with it, and you have to stay on the path of, this class precedes this class. So that's how it came about.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you graduate with a degree in interior design, do you have to like declare a specialty, residential, commercial, or events planning?
Not necessarily. No, you don't really have to make that direct decision then. But one thing that was great about our program, and I will say, while I was at school, during that process, we were not accredited, and meaning that our program with interior design overall, our program from our college was not accredited. So had I known what I wanted to do, I might have just been able to stay at home and gone to UNT, because they do have an accredited program. And we got our accreditation when I was a senior. So they used our schoolwork to finally get that check mark. But so once you graduate, let me back up. Where I was headed was between your junior and senior year, they do require you to do an internship, and it could be paid or unpaid, but you had to log certain hours, and it needed to be under another licensed interior designer in a field of your choosing. And I had a connection. It was one of my mom's friends. It was a Denton connection, thankfully. And her name was Vanessa Redmond, and she actually was working with Paul Dusing Partners at the time, and I was able to do that all summer long. So it was an unpaid internship up until I said, "Hey guys, I've met my hour requirements." They said, "Well, we'd like to keep you on. We really would like to have your help for the rest of the summer, so we'll keep you on and pay you." And it was with Paul Dusing Partners. It was mainly focusing on hospitality, so hotels and resorts. So that was where I was just given the opportunity, and that really interested me for sure. So then after graduation, you're going out to try to find a job, and you're like, well, what avenue of design do I want to do? Was it going to be, be a rep and sell things? Was it hospitality? Was it healthcare? Was it residential? And, you kind of just have to get your feet wet and figure out what you do or don't like. Knowing what I know about hospitality now, and my first job was actually multifamily.
Okay.
And that's an avenue that's apartment complexes and clubhouses. And it was a great experience. I worked there for about 9 months before Paul Dusing they hired me when they had an opportunity. So,
man, so many questions. One,
right?
And circle back to the licensing part of interior design. So, when you say licensed interior design, to me that implies there's some sort of continuing education that you, in order to maintain your license.
Most definitely.
That's correct, even for the interior design. So what kind of, I tell my kids all the time, they don't believe me, but even after you graduate high school, you're still responsible to keep learning. So,
oh my goodness,
for your field and your specialty, what continuing education are you picking up?
Okay, so to back up a little bit, before you can become licensed, you either can be under the umbrella of architecture or interior design, but it's a minimum of 60 semester or 90 quarter credit hours to get your degree. And so then once you have your degree, then you have to work under a licensed person for, depending on how many years that you took school or went to school.
Yeah.
I had to do 2 years of full-time work before I could sit for the exam to become licensed. And that exam is the NCIDQ.
Okay. So, this is really interesting, mainly because I feel like anybody can, and no offense to you or anything, anybody can go pick out a chair, for a room and
Yes.
say, oh, I'm an interior designer, like that's,
Yes.
and kind of label themselves with that. But what you're talking about is school and education and professionalism, and there's a weight
Yes.
behind that, which I was unaware of, but it makes sense because you graduate Baylor with that degree.
Hmm.
That means something, and it legitimizes you to move on to the next thing, which has some clout to it.
For sure.
It's not just
Yeah,
this
because
fly by night kind of title you
right,
just
because
bestow upon yourself.
exactly. The state of Texas, the Texas Board of Architectural Examiners then requires, once you get your associate's degree and work under an accredited other person that's in your field for 2 years, then you can sit for the NCIDQ, which is 3 parts, and it's about the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Because as an interior designer, you're not just making pretty spaces. You have to make spaces that someone's not going to break their neck on a slippery floor or fall off a landing because there's no proper railing. There's different things that we're required to, like this comes up every day in my life, the ADA,
Mm-hmm.
American Disabilities Act. I have to make sure spaces are equal for all. So if you're in a wheelchair, or if you're blind, then you are required to meet certain standards that we've come to live by,
Mm-hmm.
which I appreciate. So there's definitely steps to get you to become licensed. And then once you are licensed, you do have to keep up your continuing education. And so I'm required to do 12 hours. And I think about 4 of those have to be, um, under the ADA requirements. So learning and staying up on what the requirements are for that. So it's definitely a lot to keep up with because you can't just say you're an interior designer. You can be a designer and you can say, that's something I'm really good at. And you can,
Right. Right.
put a pretty palette together and a color scheme. But to be able to actually call yourself an interior designer, you do have to go through those steps, definitely.
Yeah. So just to recap, it's a 4-year
Hmm.
degree. Then you've
Hmm.
got to do some sort of internship. Once you graduate, then you got to do 2 years working underneath somebody,
Hmm.
and then you kind of start making your own way. Is that kind of how
Right. And then
kind
you
of the
take the
process?
exam,
The
which you
exam.
have to, right, which you have to pass, which I had one part of it that I just was, struggling with, the more legality contracts part of it. I was great on the practicum portion and the health and safety, but the other part of it was hard for me, the legal stuff. So, but it's definitely an intense test. To study for, but yes, those are the steps, and
Man.
then yearly 12 hour credit that you got to keep up with.
Yeah, man, that's really fascinating. But it makes sense though, because
Sure.
my next question, which is you might not be able to answer it so open ended,
Hmm.
just having heard all the different avenues, not only what you're saying of actually designing interior, but the sale of products and liaisons.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There's a whole scope of opportunities once you have
Oh
your
man.
license. So
Yeah.
if you can answer this, Courtney, like what would be the average entry level salary for a licensed interior designer?
Well, your entry level is not going to be probably at their licensing point yet.
Okay.
But I think you're probably in the state of Texas, I think you're around the 60, 70K mark is
Yeah.
probably where you're starting out. Um, if you're moving up into senior level, meaning you probably have a team of people below you or you've got bigger projects that you're on, you're probably, the 80s, 90s, hundreds. I mean, I think depending on what metropolitan area that you live in could greatly affect how much, your salary is and, how many projects are you managing? How many people are under you?
Yeah.
Things like that.
No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So let's get a little specific with you then. What is your
Okay.
relation with Walter's Wedding Estates, and how are you involved in that organization?
Well, I'll say it came about when I was put on furlough from Paul Dusing Partners. The
Okay.
bottom fell out of the economy. What was that, 2008,
Mm-hmm.
2009? And he basically had to lay off. We were already a small firm, but he had to lay off more than half of his employees. And I looked at my husband and I said, well, now what? Um, interior design, I joke, I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I'm definitely not a fire person, fireman. I'm not somebody that's required. I'm definitely a luxury, not a necessity sort of career. And so that created a challenge. And we said, okay, well, now what? And in Denton, we had this sweet little 14-room bed and breakfast called the Wildwood Inn.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember Lisa from Denton High, Lisa Moore.
I do.
She was actually, she interviewed me and hired me. She was my boss, and I was working part-time at Wildwood Inn. And I did that for a couple of years where I learned their business. Like I said, it was part-time. I was building up my residential business. I had a ton of clients in Fort Worth. So I was making that commute over there to meet with people, and had a great set of families that I was working with on residential. And then I was working part-time at Wildwood. And so I got to know the owners, which it was their first property to own. Keith and Sarah Walters had moved out maybe a couple of weeks prior to myself being hired there. And Lisa and I worked together there for a few years. And when she left, oddly enough, to become a policewoman, she handed my portfolio to Keith and said, just so you know, you've got this sitting here. And if you knew that you had this talent, what could you do with it? And so she kind of left it with him. And then, I'm not even kidding, probably weeks later, Keith Walters came to me and said, do you want to build wedding venues? And I said, absolutely. I would love to do that with you. And so that's how that relationship started. And we built our first wedding venue in the Colony Chapel at Anavia. So
you're doing that. Are you solely working for the Walters right now? Is that
now? I am. Yes.
Wow.
I've taken on a full-time position. Gosh, it's probably already been over a year. It's probably a year and a half at this point. But yes, I was working on a contract basis with them. So it was set up on an hourly rate. So whenever they had a project, whether it was a remodel or new construction, I would just submit invoices once a month and get paid that way. Yeah. But now I'm full-time.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah. So that leads great to my next question. Courtney, what does your average day look like for you?
Oh boy. To be an interior designer, I think a lot of people think that it is, always super fun and super easygoing, but it is not. It is, kind of up and down depending on where your project is and what stage it's in. So my days could be sitting in front of a computer and working on sketches and elevations on cabinet drawing details, or I just today was working on the back stucco wall at the design center where couples will get married outside. So I had to really detail out what that was going to look like and how I wanted the stucco details to look with the fountain that I've purchased and the lighting that goes on the wall. So, it could be a lot of desk work, like more of today. But then later this week, we are moving in. There's going to be a new concierge service with the Walters, and they've asked me to set up their office. So I'll be wearing, athletic clothes, moving furniture, unpacking things, assembling furniture. So it is a wide range for sure, whether it's, like I said, desk work or it's in the field, getting your hands dirty.
So I'm on their website right now. They've got tons of property, 35, 40 properties.
Yes.
And you are responsible for designing them. So is that something like, hey, Courtney, we just bought this property and wherever, go for it. And you, from start to finish, you spec it out and design the wedding venue? Is that what you're doing?
Yes. Yeah. So I work closely with the contractor for, whatever region that is. And, they'll purchase the property and we'll have plans in play. We'll get an architect to, draw up the plans that we're looking for. And then I get to pick everything. I get to pick the flooring and what the walls look like and furnishings, of course, and all the lighting. So basically everything that you see and touch and use in a building, I get to make the selection. So it's a lot of fun.
And a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned earlier.
It's got to be sellable.
Yeah. Well, you as you're talking and just the scope of your responsibilities, you mentioned earlier as you're walking Baylor and you kind of discounted being an artist because you didn't have the talent. I feel like what you're describing and seeing some of the stuff that you're designing, you are an artist, right? There's so much creativity that you have to possess and to be able to visualize. I feel like that's a very unique skill set that a lot of people don't have, to be able to visualize from start to finish. It's pretty impressive. Some of
Yeah, I
these
mean,
properties are beautiful. Well, they're
right?
all
It's so
beautiful.
fun. And some of them they purchase as acquisitions. And so then I get to come in and say, "Okay, let's figure out what wasn't sellable about this property and how can we make it beautiful?"
Yeah.
And then I get to build a budget based on that. So, there it definitely is a wide range. There's never a boring day. I can say that. And I will say I agree. Not every person can view things in 3D and visualize,
Mm-hmm.
and that's definitely something that I feel blessed to be able to do, because I know that not everybody can. But, I also could never be an accountant. So
Sure. Sure.
everybody has their talents.
Yeah. Okay. So, Courtney, break it down for
Mhm.
you. What do you consider the best part and maybe the most challenging part of what you do?
Oh, the best part is an install. Even though it's long days and long hours that you're putting in for an installation, you get to see all the beautiful custom pieces that you've put together and that you've either made a collage board for or you've dreamed up in your mind. Just seeing it all come together is pretty amazing. So that's definitely the most rewarding part. The biggest challenges, honestly, deadlines and staying on budget. Those are two
Mm-hmm.
biggies. This project we're working on now is throwing us a huge curveball, dealing with municipalities. We still don't have power
Mm.
for this property, and we're supposed to have it in the coming weeks. But it's been very, very frustrating to not be able to finish the project on time. And, these things happen. So
Yeah.
some things are unavoidable.
Well, it's also a good reminder that your job, what you're doing, it overlaps so many other different professions. You have to
Oh,
be
yeah.
able to communicate with contractors and architects and, yeah, city planners, and then your
Yeah.
clients. I mean, there's so many relationships that you kind of have to take care of in
Well,
order
and
to be
this one's
successful.
even more of a challenge that we're working on now. It's a design center. And so what it is it's like a hub of all the vendors that you need to be able to plan a wedding. So you can go purchase a bridal gown, you can go purchase a tux, you can design your jewelry for your wedding, you can buy stationery, you can design your flowers, your floral designer can meet with you, and you can design your cakes at the bakery, and you can meet with your planner for the wedding day. So these vendors all exist. They're, basically kind of like my clients along with my client, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of overlap there. And I've had to learn a lot about their businesses and what makes them successful so that the spaces are very functional, but, also beautiful, because you can also get married at this property too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah, very very interesting. Um, and I, as you were talking about, the best part is the install. I feel like that would be whatever sector you're working in. I feel like that would be the most exciting time. But because what you're doing is weddings, like a wedding venue, I feel like it'd just be 10 times more exciting and satisfying, knowing what the space is going to be used for, and
Oh,
to
for
kind of
sure.
to see the beauty in
It's
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like for couples, it's the biggest day of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's when they start their lives together, and it's very, very special. I don't that uniqueness is not lost on me. I mean, yes, I love designing homes for people because it's every day that they get to enjoy them, but for a wedding, it's so, so, so very special. And
Yeah.
the installs are always like Christmas morning for me. I mean, you get to open boxes and say, "Oh my goodness, look how beautiful that chair turned out," or "How
Mm-hmm.
beautiful is that accessory?" And that rug is the custom color that I've ordered. It's very, very rewarding for
Yeah,
sure.
I can imagine so. Let me ask you this, Courtney. If you weren't doing this interior design, what do you think you'd be doing? Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, what would I be doing?
What do you think you'd
Um,
be good at?
Honestly, because I love it so much, organization. I think I could probably go into people's homes and businesses and and probably be pretty successful at organization.
Hmm.
It's something that I love to do, just to pick apart a space, sort things out, and everything has its home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That'll be interesting. Okay. As we're kind of wrapping up, a few more questions. Action items. So if someone's listening to this and it resonates, kind of what you're saying, I'm tracking, man, that sounds something I might be interested in doing. What would be the next step for someone to get more information from? What would you recommend?
I'd say probably one of the most practical things that I almost wish that I had somebody to reach out and ask this question is, could I shadow you?
Hmm.
Can I shadow you for a couple of days? Would you mind? So I could hear the conversations and see the day to day and understand what it's really like to have that real world experience. The internship was very eye opening for me when I did that, but I was already finished my junior year, headed into senior year. So hello, it's a little too late to change your career path and your degree when you're at that level. So I think having somebody to shadow would be invaluable information for a young person that is just not quite sure where to land.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No,
that would be my advice.
That's good. And my wife gives me a hard time because I like talking firefighting stuff, but I have a passion for it. That's what I do.
Right.
I love it. I love it. I
Right.
can imagine you partner up with an interior designer who has a passion for it. They're going to be willing to talk about it and elaborate on some of the stuff you're talking about. It just kinda
Man, I
goes
feel like
with
I
it.
could talk about it for days.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Courtney, you've been doing this for 20 years.
Mhm.
What's
Gosh, that makes me sound old,
I know,
Clay.
I know,
Thanks.
I know. Is there, and once again, super difficult question, is there a lesson that you've learned from your profession, whether it's professionally or personally, that you've reflected on over the years? Anything kind of stand out as your time doing what you're doing?
I'd say a couple of things. There was a piece of advice that one of my professors, Dr. Bowen, gave us when we were in school. And she said, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do give somebody the response of, I'm not sure, but let me find that out. And you investigate and you figure out what the best reply to that answer is. That, coupled with embracing collaboration and teamwork over competition,
Hmm.
because I'd say that so much of what I do is a teamwork scenario. You're working with electricians and plumbers and project managers, general contractors, landscapers. I mean, you name it. There's 1,001 people that's on one job site, respecting them for their craft, but also saying, hey, can we come up and problem solve this in a different way? And not trying to make it, well, my idea is better and it's a competition. It's not. This is all about collaboration and making sure that the final product is what best services the client. So I would say those two bits of information. You don't have to have all the answers. I will find that answer for you, and teamwork over competition always.
Man, that's good. That's good. Okay. The last question I got for it, I like to ask all the people I talk to, are there any books that you would recommend to me or to listeners, whether it's professional or personal? I'm always trying to, learn something or have a good book on my nightstand. Is there anything that stands out to you? Podcast, book, anything that's got your ear lately?
I'm going to pull up, you're going to laugh, I'm going to pull up my Amazon cart. I've got something sitting in my cart that I've been wanting to read, and it was about landscape design. It's not something that I would say, oh man, this is going to change your life.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's very interesting avenue that I really haven't dedicated a lot of time to, that I would like to learn more on, is the art of landscape lighting. That's what the book is called. Somebody called it out in one of my continuing education classes. That was a book that I want to read that I haven't, so I can't say if it's brilliant. And there was another one, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Those are two that are in my Amazon cart that I want to read. And they both came highly recommended. And I think those would be probably the ones that I'd be reading next.
Those are great recommendations. That landscape lighting would be interesting. Kind of a
I thought so.
specific,
Yeah.
but kind of, yeah, interesting.
It's very specific, but if you think about like how much we're driving around in the dark, especially when the time changes, what makes the art of lighting up exteriors interesting when you're driving up to a property. I think it's very influential. You think about some really cool hotels that you've ever driven up to.
Yeah.
And how much of an impression that can make. So that's something I want to learn more about.
Yeah, I feel like that's a whole other conversation. The design of entryways, and preparing yourself for entering spaces. I think it's really interesting and really subtle. You don't really notice it
right
until someone points it out, but it's very thoughtful. A lot of thought goes into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Courtney, we went a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I appreciate your time. This is really interesting. I wasn't expecting all this. It's very cool. Thank you for your time. Thanks for creating beautiful spaces. And I know it. Like I said, it's the subtlety that really stands out to make things beautiful. And you're doing a great job. Good luck with the holidays coming up. Hope they're not going to be too stressful for you. But I really do appreciate your time.
Well, same here. I appreciate what you're doing, giving people a little just snapshot of what different career paths are out there and available. So I appreciate it as well. I look forward to hearing more that you have to offer on all of the other interviews and podcasts that you're doing.
Yep, they keep coming. All right, Courtney, tell Dustin hey for me. We'll talk later.
I sure will.
All right, bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the information and found it worth your time. We're always on the hunt for guests who are passionate about what they do and want to talk about it. So if you think you'd be interested in coming on, or if you're curious about a profession and want to know more about it, hit us up. We'll do our best to accommodate. Our email is info@myjobpodcast.com. We look forward to connecting with you. Have a great day.